The Peacemaker's Great Law, an indigenous tale based on Hiwatha and the Peacemaker by Robbie Robertson. Many centuries ago, long before colonists came to this land, in the area we now refer to as New York, a fire raged. Set by the war chief Tadadaho of the Onondaga tribe, the fire quickly destroyed everything and everyone in its path. Only one man survived the blaze. That man was Hiwatha. Distraught at losing his village, his wife, and his daughters, Hiwatha sought refuge in a cave upstream. There, consumed by anger and hunger and sleepiness, his thoughts turned to revenge. Then one day, a man in a stone boat found his way ashore. The man had heard of Hiwatha's loss and spoke to him of forgiveness and peace. Hiwatha considered the man's words but could not believe such things were possible. The man was soft-spoken and had a peculiar way of speech. "Travel with me to see your chief," he requested. "As you can see, my words are difficult to understand, but I know that you speak with power and confidence, and when you speak, others listen. I need your help, my friend. Help me carry this message." Hiwatha agreed, and so they set forth for Mohawk land. All the while, the man who would become known as simply the Peacemaker spoke to Hiwatha about healing through forgiveness. Hiwatha still could not comprehend the Peacemaker's words, but amazed by the stone boat's ability to float, a stillness began to settle on Hiwatha's heart. When Hiwatha and the Peacemaker finally arrived at their destination, the chief and the elders were summoned. As they gathered, the Peacemaker laid his hand on Hiwatha, and to Hiwatha's amazement, the Peacemaker's words began to flow through him. "Peace, power, and righteousness shall be the new way. We must join together. All nations will become one family. Our people shall have one body, one mind, and one heart. This is the message of the Great Law." The chief was moved by Hiwatha's speech, but he could not be persuaded to join their cause. He believed Tadadaho too powerful, but the Peacemaker knew the Great Law was more powerful than any one man. So Hiwatha and the Peacemaker set off to prove that all nations could join together in peace. Upon arriving in Cayuga land, Hiwatha saw that they too had fallen victim to Tadadaho. Flooded with images of the battle that had taken his family, Hiwatha cried out in agony, "Will we ever be free?" In an attempt to soothe Hiwatha, the Peacemaker asked him to sit for a spell in front of the Cayuga Council. Once again, the Peacemaker spoke through Hiwatha. "I see your lands have suffered destruction at the hands of Tadadaho. But, my friends, I do not see defeat. Instead, what I see is a passage to a new way of life. Join us, and together we can spread peace rather than war, love rather than hate, unity rather than fear." At that, the Peacemaker placed his fist over his heart, and a feeling of strength and trust ran down Hiwatha's spine. The same must have happened to the Cayuga's chief because he agreed to join their cause. And so the trio traveled on. In Seneca land, the three of them were met with spears, and for a moment the Peacemaker looked worried. But then the Seneca's chief ordered the spears to be lowered. "The wind has carried your message from the land of Cayuga," he said. "Please, come. We all want to learn about you, Peacemaker, and this great law you speak of." And so the Peacemaker and Hiwatha told them. They told the Seneca people that all would surely perish should the violence continue, that the only way to victory was through unity, and that time for action was now. The Seneca chief was convinced and agreed to travel with the trio to further lands. Guided by the moon, the quartet found themselves halfway to Oneida land when they fell into a large trap. The next morning, the Oneida's chief stood over them all. "Why would 2 chiefs and 2 strangers be so foolish to enter our territory in the darkness?" he questioned. The Peacemaker tried to explain, but his words had no power over Oneida's chief. So the Peacemaker turned to Hiwatha. "Tell your story," he beseeched. "Tell us of your great loss." So Hiwatha did. And as Hiwatha began to tell his story, he began to feel something come over him. It was forgiveness. While Hiwatha had not been able to save his family, on this journey he had been able to forgive himself. For the first time, the anger that had clouded Hiwatha's mind was gone. And so it was that he was able to remember the joy of his family. Moved, the Oneida chief chose to join their cause. And so the quintet returned to the Mohawk. But the Mohawk chief told them that word of their mission had traveled to Tatadaho and refused to participate. Angered by his lack of faith, the Oneida chief brandished his spear. "No!" cried the Peacemaker. "We no longer use violence. Look, I will climb this big tree, and Chief Mohawk, your men shall cut it down. But I will not perish. The river will catch my body and carry it to safety. Then you will know that my words are true." And so it was, just as the Peacemaker foretold. Filled with emotion, the Mohawk chief agreed to follow the canoes to the land of Onondaga to confront Chief Tatadaho. The wicked Tatadaho lived separately from his people. When Hiwatha arrived at Tatadaho's home, Tatadaho appeared at his doorway, hunched over, withered and twisted. In an instant, Hiwatha's anger had returned. He brandished his spear as he took stock of Tatadaho's appearance. Scales covered much of Tatadaho's back, and snakes slithered through his hair. And when Tatadaho opened his mouth to speak, no words came out, only a hiss. "No!" cried the Peacemaker once more. Then something unexpected happened. The Peacemaker began to sing a soft, haunting melody of purity and truth. Spellbound, Hiwatha dropped his weapon. Satisfied, the Peacemaker asked Hiwatha to make some medicine for Tatadaho's sickness. Then he added, "Where there is darkness, we must bring light, and it is only by forgiving that we are set free." So, Hiwatha presented Tatadaho with some medicine. And over 3 days, Tatadaho began to change. First, his scales dropped off. Then, with some help from the Peacemaker, the snakes slithered off of Tatadaho's head. Then, finally, Tatadaho stood upright once more. At that, the Peacemaker led everyone to a large pine. "People of all nations must now come together as one," he commanded. "We shall bury all our weapons of war beneath this tree, the tree of peace. This will symbolize the end of our fighting. After all the instruments of war had been buried, the peacemaker spoke again. As 5 nations, we will bring forth peace, power, and righteousness. The women of our tribes shall appoint the chiefs, and as one people we shall live under the protection of the great law. All voices will be heard as we now vote before action is taken. And atop this great pine, an eagle will look over all 5 nations. And that eagle shall be you, Tadadahu. You will be the great keeper of peace, the protector of all the people. Joyous noise erupted from the crowd. Hiwatha looked over to Tadadaho, but Tadadaho was gone. A beautiful scream echoed through the woodlands as 5 nations looked up to see an eagle perched atop the tree of peace. This is a true story of peace. My question for you today is this: what other true stories of peace do you know? What elements do all true stories of peace have in common? Share your thoughts at coffee hour or with a family member or friend this week.